Alright. So we're recording now, Travis Hymel, person I'm making this video with.
For the first time today. That wouldn't happen to be the second time.
By the way, I loved you and you too.
Oh, thanks. I'll let Bono know you said hi.
Oh man. No, this is the second time we're making this video because it got a little off color.
Not because of me. Not because of me.
But so yeah, no. So we decided this isn't going to be a back issue roulette episode. We're gonna do another one of those in a couple days, though.
At least not for today.
Right. We're gonna do that in a couple days. It took me forever to get that back issue roulette episode up because, like, when we made it, I was feeling on the mend, and then immediately I took a downturn. Wait, what?
Nothing.
And immediately,
I had the death pool on you. I almost made $200.
Yeah, you did. You almost. I got. Not like had to go to the hospital worse, but couldn't get it off my sofa, and was barely sleeping. So yeah. It just to get to my computer. I wish I had a laptop right now because I would have just edited it while sitting there. I almost said satting there. English, it's a language that I speak.
You're not an English teacher.
But anyway, so we'll do another back issue roulette episode in a couple days. But you brought up something you saw. Was it on Twitter?
Oh, well, the main article I saw actually was just popped up on my Google alerts on my phone. And the original article was talking about how comic book professionals wanted to do a crossover between Marvel and DC to help out comic shops. I'm actually not phrasing it probably correctly, but they think that this crossover might bring, people into the stores.
So we're going to kind of talk about that a little bit, but we're mostly going to talk about like the situation with comic shops and how you can help. Now, I saw something today that said like 30% of comic book stores are closing forever as a result of the virus. So let's get the obvious. Wait, what?
Is that 30% confirmed?
I don't know if it's true, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was.
Yeah, I know.
Now, to be fair, that number might be misinterpreting the idea that the stores are closing currently because of the virus and don't know if they'll reopen.
And that's why I take some of that information with a grain of salt, because I think some of the people who report on it are reporting incorrectly. However, I do know one store for sure is going to go out of business, which was Lee's Comics, and that's based in California in Mountain View. Originally, when I was living in California, they actually had two locations, one in Mountain View, one in San Mateo, which is close to where I lived. They closed the San Mateo location and condensed everything to Mountain View. That was maybe about 5 years ago. And unfortunately, this guy who's been in business for a long time, he said he's just actually going to be closing up the shop and keeping an eBay store open to sell some rare items.
But here's the thing, like, people don't understand what a comic book store is. Like, it is the quintessential American small business, and it really doesn't take much more than a one decent hit for those businesses to go completely out. Especially, it's comic books. Like, it's something that we love, but it's not essential. Like it's food, shelter, clean water, toilet paper. Like, certain things fall well above comic books. And, we both lived through Hurricane Katrina and the BP oil spill. And the BP oil spill didn't affect us that much, personally. But it did definitely affect the region. And I know of plenty of comic shops that took hits because of it. There's one I'm going to mention here. I'm a big fan of them. If you're ever in Lafayette, Louisiana, go to Acadiana Comics. They took a huge hit because so many of the guys that were buying comics from them, they would have their comics on order in pull boxes, and they would come in once a month to come, get their comics, but they were all sent home. They were, because of the oil spill. And that comic shop, they almost went out of business. They took a massive hit. And they're not the only ones. Hurricane Katrina, plenty of comic shops went out of business. Some reopened, some, BSI Comics reopened under new management or new ownership because the previous owner, Mr. Carl, who's unfortunately passed now, he owed Diamond Distributors all this money for the comics they had coming in, but the comics couldn't come in because shipping routes were closed. Interstates were closed down, and there was nobody here with jobs or money to buy those comics, so he went out of business. Because Diamond wouldn't even give him a break.
Yeah.
So it's very easy. And now, granted, those are huge national disasters. I'm not, when I say like it doesn't take much, but the truth is like comic shops can close down rather easily. And the reality is like we don't know exactly how many comic shops are going to close as a result of this disaster, or small businesses in general. But there's definitely going to be a lot.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you said about. I'm sorry, the store name was Acadiana Comics?
Yes.
Okay. So, what you're saying, they're having issues. I'm sorry, in BSI, you were also talking about was having issues, too, with paying Diamond, whose Diamond is the only distributor for comic books. So, if we refer to Diamond, that's who we're talking about, is Diamond distributors. Mm-hmm. And, something that's happening out here, because a lot of places, because of coronavirus, are having shelter in place. Some stores can't really open to the public. Some can't be open at all. Some are doing mail order and curbside pickup. Mm-hmm. But, in terms of, the stores that have to close, they still have they're still going to get charged by Diamond for any shipments. They're not going to be getting new books. They're not going to be selling any of that stock. Mm-hmm. So luckily, recently, Diamond decided not to ship any new orders, so any new books. So from what I read, I believe it's still perennial stuff. This are like trades that have already come out, but no new books.
Right. I mean, I'm not going to give Diamond any credit there. I mean, DC's closing their printer. I don't think it's that they're being, they're trying to help comic shops. I think they just realize they can't get the stuff out. But
yeah. Well, otherwise comic books would be just saddled with this, and you would know this more than me because you actually worked in a shop for this. Doesn't Diamond, if they would still have to have some kind of order go through per month to keep their account active? I forget how it works for that.
I've heard something like that. I've never dealt with that end of it though.
Okay.
So yeah, but anyway, we did want to talk a little bit about what they were saying, but we want, and this isn't going to be a negative video, even though we're talking about depressing stuff. We just wanted to talk about stuff that we think could actually help the comic book industry. But you were saying, so they were talking about like a big Marvel DC crossover helping. And my issue with, look, if they want to make a Marvel DC crossover, and I know you were saying that some of that was just that men and women in the industry just talking about it would be fun for them in particular to do certain books.
Yeah, that's why I think that topic ended up going. Because people were kind of bored, they're at home, so they just wanted something. So, if you want, I could send you over the article real quick. If you want,
well, you could just read it.
I was referring to.
You can just read it if you want.
Okay. So the title is, this is from CBR. Comics Pros call for Marvel DC crossover to save the industry after shutdown. With the industry in the midst of a shutdown, Comics Pros are calling for a crossover to save things. So, just to kind of go through what they're talking about, because Gail Simone was the one to start this topic off on Twitter, and she also started the hashtag #PleaseMarvelDC to kind of get attention for it. but to be honest, the way, and I'm not a big fan of CBR, but because eventually it seems like, some of the tweets they're gathering from some of these pros are more like kind of a wish list kind of thing. Because me and you have talked about, of course, I've talked about with other pros. What would you like to work on? What would be, something fun? So I think that's what it kind of turned into more than an actual cry for, hey, we should really do this crossover.
Well, I mean, the reality is that the biggest issue with the industry right now is that you can't get the comics to the stores, and the stores can't get the customers to come buy the books because they don't have money, or if they do have money, people are trying to be fairly cautious with how they're spending it.
It's a luxury at this point. If you have the money to buy comics for entertainment, find the store near you that might be open. Because real quick, some stores are still open. They're either doing mail order. If there's not a shelter in place, they can actually still do like curbside pickup.
Yeah, a lot of stores are doing that. I know BSI is. I think Stoddard over at Showcase Comics in Slidell is. Yeah. I don't know if any of the ones locally by you are, but
they're not open in terms of to getting curbside anymore. Starting, I think I want to say Tuesday.
Is it mail order?
Yeah.
I think a lot of them are doing mail order now. And if you are interested in buying comics, definitely contact your local comic shop and see if they're doing mail order, because they, believe me, they will if you have the ability. Now, but here's the thing, like here's the problem with, like, let's say Marvel and DC got Diamond to open up shipping routes so that they could next month do a big, like, 4-issue event with, like, just their top name artists and writers. Let's be real about it. I, as a comics fan, can tell you right now, if what little money I had, I was able to spend on comics, at the moment, these books wouldn't be less than $5 to $7 each. Yeah. No chance. Like, let's say they were like like prestige format, something like that. Like, they're at least going to be like $7 to $9, something like that. I'd rather spend money on books that have already come out that I don't have, that I know I'm going to like, than something by current creators, just because, to be frank, I feel like comics fans have been burned by a lot of new books, and the ones that come out that are amazing, like, I was blown away by Hickman's House of X. Powers of 10, not as much. Like, it was really cool, but like it wasn't, but like House of X. I mentioned Warren Ellis and Declan Shelvey and Jordy Belair's Injection. Like, there have been new books that blow me away, but it's not like it was like 10 years ago. And I'd rather buy, like, if I'm going to spend a lot of money and what little money I have, I'd rather get like old trades. Personally.
Yep. And a lot of people feel that way. I mean, at a local store here called Warmore Comics in Colorado, they have a huge, at least 20 feet, both sides, of nothing but pretty much like new release comics from the last maybe month or two, sitting up there. And there's so much to go. The one side is dedicated to DC and Marvel only, and then the other is the independents.
Right.
And people that are not sure what I mean by independent small publishers. Image counts, still Dark Horse Comics. Even though you might have heard the name, they're still independent publishers, or considered independent publishers. And there's so many, we've talked about, me and you have talked about this several times, and people go into comic shops and might notice that it's kind of overwhelming by the amount of material that's out there to go and buy. So it's very saturated, especially in the last couple of years. You have so many new publishers have popped up, and it's kind of hard for me when I go in to kind of, do I want to take a chance on this? Do I want to take a chance on it? There's so many titles to look at and choose from. and at the cover price now are at least $4 to $5 for an average. There's a company alternative that does like newsprint comics.
Right.
That's a cheaper price. I'm going to leave them out just because the majority of the other stuff is about, like I said, $4 to $5. And it's hard to take a chance on certain books when I'm spending, $5 for that. Whereas I can get a trade, maybe from, depending on who it's from, $10 to $20, and I get 5 or 6 or even 7 issues worth of book.
And no ads, anything like that.
Oh yeah, zero ad.
You also bring up a good point of like the oversaturation, because when I say like there's not enough good books coming out here, the reality is like the stands are so buried in stuff that there might be a lot of good stuff coming out that's just buried and you never get your hands on. Yeah.
Oh, totally. There's a few I actually have to kind of try and find on my own. And luckily, I work with comics when I'm speaking. I think the gentleman's name is Sean. He's one of the owners of the store. And he was saying he'll at least take a chance on most independent comics, at least to the second issue. And if it doesn't sell well after the second issue, just stop ordering it.
Right. Well, and most comic shops will try. If you work for indie companies like Devil's Due and is it Full Moon?
Yeah, Full Moon Comics. So they're an offshoot of Full Moon Entertainment, who does like the Puppet Master movies, is what they're probably best known for. If I was going to say anything that people would recognize, it's going to be Puppet Master.
Well, but you also, you're about to, hopefully in the next few months you're going to start work on another creator-owned property that you've been wanting to work on. But I've told you before, like, if you call local comic shops and you pitch it to them, a lot of times they'll take, not all of them, but if they have a little spare cash that month, they'll take a chance, if you're willing, especially if you're willing to like sign books and stuff like that. So I mean, some of that's personal, but the reality is like I heard, I don't want to mention the YouTuber, but a YouTuber that I occasionally watch that kind of annoys me because, just being real for a second about comic book YouTubers, 90% of them don't know what they're talking about. Like, they're, not to say that they're bad people or anything like that, but their perspective on the comics industry is based solely on just what they think in their head. Like, they've never worked in a comic book store. Half of them aren't even huge comic book fans. Like, one of the guy that I'm talking about, not going to mention names, but he's a fan of various, nerd things like D&D,
like the term, or just say the comic book industry is dying. But I think when you actually watch their videos, a lot of times they talk about how they're pointing out how the industry is going to change. Or the industry should change. I'm
not even saying that. I'm saying a lot of times their opinions come from other people who also don't know what they're talking about. Or if they do, they know half of what they're talking about.
Because like what we're talking about, like when people say the comic industry is dying, I think when you see those types of videos, especially right now, in particular, is going to be the comic book stores are going to be the ones who are in trouble. Comics and as an industry itself, I think would end up changing, but I'm not trying to go into that. But
it wouldn't be if
the store.
If stores go away, there would be a comic book industry, but it wouldn't be a full industry. Yeah. It would basically be smaller publications like Disney, in theory, will still own Marvel. Warner Brothers might still own DC, and they'll have people put together books that would sell through like Amazon and, if there's any big store retailers like Barnes & Noble still, but there wouldn't be comic books like single issues. It would just be, I don't even know if you'd call them graphic novels. They would just be books,
Let's steer back a little bit more towards like, going back to what we were talking about, how we can help, or anyone can help a comic book shop.
Well, I'm going to start with my, so I have two number ones. And honestly, they're my biggest points. One is for fans, and one is for comic book pros. I'll start with the fans first, because this is something, hopefully, whoever watches this is a fan. The easiest thing you can do to help, and I'm not talking about, it's saving the comic book industry, but in order to save the comic book industry, you have to save the stores. And the number one thing you can do is pick up your pulls. Like, far and away, something that people don't understand. They think, like, your local comic shop is not like Walmart. They're not, it's not like Amazon. Sorry, there's a truck driving through my neighborhood. But there's no return policy on 99% of books. There is every once in a while, like a publisher like Marvel on a specific book, like a new X-Men issue will make it fully returnable. That's rare. That's very rare. But so if you go to your local comic shop and order Secret Wars Volume 1, they'll say, okay, and they'll order it for you. If then you go to Barnes & Noble and see it and buy it, and the next time you go and they're like, well, it's your book's here, and then you're like, oh, I already bought that. You could, I don't want it. Well, now they're now stuck with that book. And yeah, maybe somebody wants Secret Wars Volume 1, and maybe they don't. But they've spent money, and they can't get that money back. And so it might go tomorrow, or it might sit there for 3 years. And especially, like, I remember a girl that I know once ordered this French manga, and I want to say it was called, like, Sky Doll or something like that. And it had, like, all kinds of weird sexual stuff in it. She ordered it. When it came in, she was like, oh, yeah, I don't want that anymore. And
God, it's so dumb.
Yeah, and that book never sold. Nobody wanted Sky. I might be getting the name wrong, but I remember it was like this French manga. And nobody wanted that. And they were just out that money, And it's not like you can't tell a customer, like, hey, screw you, because then you're just going to lose more sales. So if you want to save, and look, and I'm not saying, mistakes happen, do your best, but if you order something, order it because you want it. And if you don't want it anymore, don't wait 2 weeks. Like, tell them, like, the next day, and hopefully they can cancel the order. It depends on when final order cutoff is. But that's, like, the number one thing you can do to save, your local comic shop.
Yeah.
And the comic industry.
Anything in your pull folder. And just to go on a little bit further about pull folders, is that if you were going to a comic shop, and if this might interest you when they open back up again, is that you can tell a comic shop, if you like, certain Image books, Marvel, whatever it may be, you can start a subscription, and they'll stop basically stocking in your folder every time it comes out. You just have to make sure you pick it up and actually pay for your books. And
and if a book starts to suck, and you tell them, like, hey, I really don't want this anymore, that's not that big a deal. But don't do it if you're going to, because there's some people that wait like 2 months to pick up their pulls. So they'll come in, and it's not every customer, but I've seen this 100 times, and it's usually the same customer over and over again. They'll come in and finally get their books, and it's stacked like this high. And they're just going through it, like, oh, yeah. You know what? I don't like this anymore. So they'll pull out like 8 books. And it's like, dude, like, if you'd done this 2 months ago, we wouldn't have ordered the extra copies. And the thing is, and what really kills comic shops about that is, new comics have a shelf life. Once they're back issues, their shelf life, it's hard to explain, but, like, the longer a comic sits there, it can either be worth more or less. As a new comic, people only want it within a month. I know it doesn't make a lot of sense, like, as I'm explaining it, but, like, 6 months later, people might want it again. But there's, like, a certain shelf life where it's on stands, where basically it's because you have the shelf that has all the stuff that came out this week, and then you have your pile with the stuff that came out a month ago. And so it's like a shiny new toy where people want the stuff that came out this week. And the stuff that came out 2 months ago, they're kind of like, so if you're gonna order, be subscribed to stuff and have it in your pull file, try to keep up to date. And if you don't want it anymore, let them know as soon as possible, because those books are going to sit there, and they might be worth money again in a few months, or they might sit there forever.
Yeah. Literally, actually, so you've been to the store I'm about to talk about. So Time Warp in Boulder, Colorado.
Mm-hmm. Nice store, very nice store.
Yeah. The owner's name is Wayne. Great guy, great store. If you're in that area and when it's open again, definitely check it out. Or check out their eBay. I know they have an eBay open right now and they're doing mail order. But anyway, I was in there and I was looking for a particular comic, and it was called Sword of Ages. Gabriel Rodriguez wrote and illustrated it. Mm-hmm. He's the artist that was on Lock and Key. Gorgeous art. But I couldn't find every shop I went to. They didn't stock it. Every shop. Now, granted, this was the first one, and of course, I like that they do this. Especially if you're about to leave, they're like, "Oh, were you looking for anything particular?" And I told them what I was looking for, and it's like, "Cool, we can order it for you." Great. Mm-hmm. Now, here's the thing: if I didn't pick that up, it was like $25 retail. So I don't know what their costs would be, but if I didn't actually ask for that, they probably just would have been. If I didn't go pick it up, they probably just would have sat around, because I don't think anyone was asking for it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I've never heard of it.
Gorgeous book. It's pretty fun. Sword and sorcery meets a little bit more space sci-fi. Very fun book.
Yeah, I'd never heard of it. I'm a big fan of Gabriel Rodriguez, but his name, unfortunately, doesn't get mentioned much anymore.
Which is a shame, because I actually even have, hold on. This might be a little off topic, but, just his covers alone. This is a book, just nothing but his covers from Lock and Key. And there's one in particular I'm just getting to. They're showing the pencils and inks on his work, and it's just incredible. The guy is a beast. So definitely, if you are interested, check it out, or check out Lock and Key if you like the TV show. But be prepared; it's completely different, in my opinion, than the TV show.
Yeah, you and I are going to sit down and discuss Lock and Key, the show, and that unfortunately, I'm sorry.
It will be a very negative video.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I hate to say it, but because Lock and Key, I've told you, I've told many people, is one of the best comic series of the last, I'd say, 15 years. In the top 10, I think. In my opinion, top 10. And the TV show was a travesty.
For people who are watching...
Wait. I'm sorry. Travesty?
Oh...
I'm going to use that from now on. Travesty. Oh, that's a good one. We
just lost the one subscriber we had. No.
I thought it was you.
That's what I'm talking about.
This is a new channel. If you feel free to subscribe, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah. Just when we do that video, by the way, if you like that TV show, you might not want to listen to it. It's cool if you like the TV show, and that's what I'm going to leave it at. If you like it, cool.
We'll get into that when we do that. Let's not get too far off topic. I'd say my next thing, and I've been saying this for years, and this is for comics pros. One of the best ways to save the comic book industry would be to have every comic book pro be forced to spend no less than 2 weeks working in a comic book store. And I say that because the people that run the industry have no clue how the industry actually works. They don't know who their fans are. It's such... You and I have discussed this.
Yeah.
You pay attention to YouTube videos. You look on Twitter, and your perspective of comic books is, Comicsgate, which isn't a real thing. I'm not going to get into it right now. Comicsgate, it's a couple of guys. Regardless of whether you agree with their perspective, it's a couple of guys that compromise Comicsgate. But when you go into a comic book store, all this negativity that you're hearing about, misogyny, hating gays, all this stuff, none of that exists. Comics fans, they're not as happy as they used to be, but people still get along and have fun in comic book stores. It is completely the opposite of what the internet tells you. But you have these comics bros and again, some of them are comics hate, some of them are most of them are people with a different political perspective, and they're talking about the industry and comic book fans, and they're talking to comic book fans online, and they don't know who they're talking to. They don't have a clue. Go spend 2 weeks working in a comic book store, and then tell me that your perspective on the comic book industry is exactly the same. No chance.
Yeah. And especially when people talk about blah blah blah, my book is selling pretty well, and they're going off diamond numbers.
That drives me crazy.
Yeah, so just to go off, on a tangent a little bit. So when people cite this book sold 10,000 copies, Diamond sold 10,000 copies to comic book stores. That's not to fans. That's not actual people that goes to. So Buck was saying, Adam was saying a second ago, which was if you don't go pick up your books, they're still stuck with it.
Right.
And
that's not to count. That's also not counting the fact that if it's a big book, let's say a new Batman #1's coming out. Yeah. The average comic shop might order let's go low 50 copies of Batman #1 just because it's Batman. Got news for you. If it's Captain Marvel #1, they ain't ordering 75 copies of that. Maybe 20 to 30, depending on the store and their demographics.
Yes, really.
Right, but I'm using Batman because Batman's kind of the height of the comic book world. Yeah. So let's say they order 50 to 75 copies. In theory, because it's Batman, those copies will go away. But let's say they're giving a shot to a new Avengers comic, and they order 50 copies. They might not sell all 50 copies. Or if it's a new event series like Infinity Jesus, I don't know. There's always an Infinity something. Secret Jesus, whatever you want to call it. They might order heavy and go 50 copies, but if people aren't into that event series, they might still sit there. So what comic shops do is they order 2 different piles. There's the pull piles, the ones that their customers have spent specifically. I'm Adam Santino and I want Batman, Avengers, Justice League, whatever. So they order those copies specifically. And then they order copies that are just for the shelf, meaning if you, Travis Hymel, don't have a pull folder, but you walk into Time War Comics and you want Batman, it's still there for you in theory. So they order 2 different sets. And that's assuming that they even come in, because there's issues with Diamond where comics get damaged and there aren't enough copies to go around, and anyway.
Do you think Diamond still counts the damaged comics in their numbers?
That's a good question. I don't know.
I wouldn't be surprised because
if it's
there's some shady stuff that happens sometimes.
If it's a limited number, absolutely. I'd say almost definitely, but I can't say for sure. I mean, just in my opinion, I'd say probably, yeah. But anyway,
I think I agree a little bit about what you were saying about pros working in shops. I think what pros should keep in mind is and this goes for a lot of creators. Not everything you make is going to be for everyone. And when you're making something that's going to be carried in the direct market, the comic book store, that's honestly a particular audience. And sometimes, unfortunately, what you want to make is not going to fit that audience.
Right.
And I think that's a bigger problem right now is certain things. It's I don't know who this book is for, but it's not going to be for me. And unfortunately, some of the audience that these creators want to target are not going into the stores.
None of them are. They're not. I remember Mark Waid. I don't remember what he was saying, but Mark Waid tends to get in fights with people. Like if you're a YouTube viewer, you might think and I'm not going to mention the guy in the lawsuit, but you might think like this is a new thing. Mark Waid gets into fights with people. He always has. Fantastic writer. One of the best writers in comics history, bar none. Kind of a douchebag. Gets into fights with people. But he would get into fights with like comic stores, and then one day he decided to put his money where his mouth was. So he bought a comic shop. You know what happened immediately after he bought a comic shop and owned it for a couple months?
Honestly, I don't know.
He apologized. He said, "Oh, I didn't know how this worked." Now, I don't know what he's done since. I don't think he owns that comic shop anymore, but
not sure.
He still gets in fights with people.
I never knew that backstory to it.
Yeah, I mean, this was a while. This might be a decade ago now, but yeah, they don't go into comic shops. And I'm trying to think. You said something a second ago that I wanted to latch onto, but all this is sort of covered by them just going to the comic shop. Oh, Mark Waid. All this falls in there. Comics pros, stop fighting with your fans. I want to say Dan Slott was one the other day who said, like, I don't want you buying my comics if you vote for, not going to get into it. Shut up. Stop saying things like that. All these people, like, okay, sorry, had to pause there for a second. But yeah, no, so you're in a rare position because you're still working your way up, and you still actually buy comics in stores. Yeah. And so you see a lot of this stuff, but you have to fight to make a living as a comics creator. You know, when you're working for Devil's Due, like being real again, Devil's Due is a pretty well-known publisher, but they're not paying Marvel or DC page rates. You know,
I will say that just at least Devil's Due, they actually pay a decent page rate compared to actually other known publishers out there. I will say that. Give them a little bit.
I'm not crapping on them either. I'm not trying to make them sound bad.
Because you definitely weren't, because another thing people don't really know is artists and writers, and actually, I mean, pretty much everyone who is a part of the production of a comic is probably not paid exactly what they deserve, unless they're for a bigger company, so like the big two.
Well,
but for me, what I've experienced, at least I've decent page rate.
Okay, I thought you were still talking. Sorry.
No.
My point though is that so many of the guys that are running their mouths online, not all of them, some of them are smaller guys, but a lot of them are bigger guys that just don't see the effect. And it's like, look, when you run your mouth, when you insult fans, you're telling someone, and some of these guys are literally saying, I don't want you buying my books. Well, guess what? That's how the industry runs. Not everyone, look, I don't have to agree with James Cameron's politics. Like, as long as his movie isn't insulting me, I'm fine. Look, and I'll bring up an example. I was reading Captain America comics when Ed Brubaker was writing Captain America. And I stopped when Ed Brubaker started insulting me personally in the books. And I don't want to get into that. We're not talking about politics. I'm just saying, when you insult me as a fan, I'm not going to buy your books. Well, guess what? It's not 3 people you're telling not to buy your books.
Yeah.
It's a large number of fans, and the more fans stop buying your books, that's why the industry has been slowly declining, because you keep telling people, you are not the ones that I want to buy my books. You as a lot of people.
Devil's advocate a little bit here, because sometimes people are being trolls, and it does aggravate people. And I would kind of see myself getting aggravated if I was creator and getting some of these troll responses. But at the same time, you don't have to respond to it. Also, some of the responses make me laugh, and the thing is, I off camera and stuff, I curse like a sailor, and I say I could say some mean things.
You're a pretty
but
sweet
I would
sailor.
never do it like to someone who's a customer. Like that. It's like, if you don't have anything good to say like that publicly, you really shouldn't say it on Twitter.
And they're ultimately, in the comic book industry, the customers aren't just your customers; they're also kind of your boss. Because or maybe boss isn't the right word, but the more people stop buying because you're telling them that you're not the ones that you want to buy, the less people are paying. And that affects you.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, Marvel and DC are still putting out a lot of books, but smaller publishers might be having to cut back. And certainly, if there's ever a time to remember this, it's during a disaster like this, the coronavirus pandemic, where we don't know what the outcome is. But if the industry is going to survive, it's going to have to change. And your attitude towards the other people in the industry, regardless, you don't have to like them. You don't. You don't have to. You can think they're the scum of the earth, but don't go online and taunt them and tell them you're not the people we want.
Yeah.
Because they're not. They're going to go, okay, fine, I'll spend my money elsewhere. They'll go buy video games.
Have done that and have ended up backing more Kickstarter indie projects.
Mm-hmm.
That are non-shops. I don't know how much actually that how many of those people actually went over. How many left. But you've definitely seen a rise in more creator independent projects being sold outside of a store, which is not good for comic book shops if they wanted to carry it.
And the comic book shops get forgotten in all this stuff, and they're the front line of the industry. The Walking Dead would not be a, I don't know if it's $1 billion property yet, but it's got to be close to it. At least hundreds of millions have been made off of Walking Dead.
At least I agree with that. Probably multi-million dollar, but I don't think billion.
Well, it's in the hundreds of millions, guaranteed.
Yeah.
There's no question there. But that none of that happens without comic book stores. Comic book stores are the reason that The Walking Dead made as much money as it did. And so many other books. You and I have talked about another Robert Kirkman property, Invincible, which we're both big fans of. And I personally is in a comic shop. I always tell people the story. One of the good things that Robert Kirkman does is he makes these omnibus editions that are $125 for 50 comics, or 48. I think it's 48. That is an incredible savings. But very few people buy those because you got to be really into the books, meaning you haven't bought all the trades and all that. And I once sold some guy who had never read an Invincible comic. I once sold him the first Invincible omnibus, $125. He bought it without ever having read an issue of Invincible, simply off of me selling it.
Yeah.
And
and also what you're kind of
demonstrating
too is customer service in comic shops probably goes a long way as well.
Right. And there's bad shops for sure. There's definitely shops that you walk into and nobody talks to you. And look, and I'm not going to pretend, and this is a problem in the industry. I'm not saying it's most shops. I don't think it is. But there are still shops that do kind of mistreat girls, like not like catcall them, but necessarily, but like just don't sort of look down on female readers. That does exist.
I'm not saying it doesn't exist.
Yeah, but I don't think it's the majority. I don't think the industry could work if it was the majority. But yeah. I mean, is there anything else you can think of offhand? But I think these are
in general, in terms of what plagues the comic shop,
or things that would help.
I don't know. I definitely agree about the professionalism, especially social media. Or if you can't take all these people, because I can understand it's annoying hearing from trolls, and might get discouraged because honestly, as me personally, a creator, sometimes I've seen like a bad comment, and I'll be like, I won't respond, but I'll take it with me for the rest of the day, and like just think about I'll start drawing, and be like, while I'm doing the drawings, like, you suck. What are you doing?
It's funny.
Is what I'm getting at. If you can't handle it.
Well, I even pointed one out to you because you was it Devil's Due that did the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez book?
Yeah.
You did one story in it. You were the artist. You weren't the writer. You did a good job, and because. And look, and I'm not. Again, we're not talking about politics. AOC or any of that stuff.
And actually, real quick, I'm not a politic person. I am a money person.
Right.
When I get offered a gig.
And well,
what? Okay, I'll take it.
And I'll just go out right now and I'll say it, like, I was the person that told you to take that job.
Yeah.
And I very much like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I have a lot of bad things to say about that woman, but at the end of the day, you're trying to make your mark, and it's a job. You didn't write the book. You're not expressing your politics. You just did the job that you were assigned. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, you're a professional, and that's how professional behaves.
And the criticism was the way I drew Nancy Pelosi. Which, fun fact, I had to draw a semi-naked, muscular Nancy Pelosi, which was gross even for me when I was reading the script. But when I was asking the writer, it's like, how do you want me to draw that exactly? Like, is this supposed to be like really satirical? He's like, yeah, make it look kind of gross, gross, like an old version of China from WWE, but like just wrinkly.
Or like Madonna now.
Yeah, he's like, make it look unappealing, and that's the joke. The thing is,
right.
That was part of the joke because this is satire. And you had shown me some. Was it Tim Pool or was it someone else? Or
no, it wasn't Tim Pool. It was a right wing site. It doesn't matter, but some of the comments were like, "This guy can't even draw," and it was
it's like
what?
It's like well, they were mostly like, "This is how people see Nancy Pelosi." It's like, I hope not. For one, I hope not, because
it's how I'd see Nancy Pelosi. I'm
I'm
about to turn this off and go have a happy day with. You know what? Let's stop.
But anyway, and you showed me that, and I was kind of like, oh man, I was like, I was depressed for maybe about 10 minutes, and then I realized, like, well, no, it's satire.
Right.
It's supposed to be funny, and I don't think people get the joke.
Well, not only that, but some of those people didn't know what they were talking about. I remember one comment was like, "He can't draw. If you see, like, her right hand disappears," and it was like, dude, her hand's underneath a towel.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, technically it does disappear because it's underneath something. Like, it's, so people. Look,
and I'm not the person to go and track down that guy and comment on his post, because what does it even matter?
Right.
Because a lot of times on the internet, people already have their opinion formed, and they're not going to change it for anything. And also, it doesn't help me to argue with this guy, because, to be honest, he's probably not going to buy the book, and he's probably certainly not the customer base. I had talked earlier about that, about having certain audiences, for books, and he probably is not that audience for that book.
Right. So it's, and I get it. We're making a YouTube video. There's going to be people who watch this and, like, say all kinds of crap, and, I'm sure I'm Comicsgate or something like that, whatever. I get it, and I've had people, like, I made a video once that was just me talking about a photography workshop that I went on, and the guy that I consider my mentor in some fashion that did the workshop, he's not well liked by a lot of people. And so it was just comment after comment trashing me. And the ones that were making a reasonable argument, I wasn't offended by. But the thing about the internet is, those aren't the ones that upset you. It's the ones that people are just trying to trash you with no basis. The actual trolls. Because there's a difference. There are people, and that's something that I think comics pros need to recognize, is that not every person that tells you that something you did was wrong is a troll. Sometimes they're trying to help you or point out, like, this isn't how this is supposed to be, to help the industry. And you have to be able to recognize, if you're going to listen to them at all, you have to be able to recognize that they're not always just being like, hey, screw you,
Yeah. And I think, in terms of, to go to answer what you were saying, what else I have to say about what could help shops, it would have to be a big industry change in terms of this, which was one, I think, better price points on single books. If we're going to keep doing single issues, single monthlies, I really feel that it should be a little bit more accessible in terms of price. I kind of feel like it's a big investment to buy a $5 book. that I might completely hate.
The problem with that is you'd have to go and do... And Alterna is very smart for this. The problem is partially the price of paper stocks.
Yeah.
And Alterna's been able to change their price point by using newsprint.
Yeah.
And hey, maybe that's not a bad view of it, is where everything maybe should go back to newsprint and use recycled paper. And then if you want like the higher quality stuff, maybe that's on, but how would that work with modern digital coloring?
It depends. I think it really depends on the printer. I've seen some examples in the past, and it doesn't look great for certain coloring styles. But for the most part, it looks fine. Coloring is fine. But if people still want to do, I don't mind buying the single issues monthly, but if there's, for instance, a trade, I think trade should definitely be a nicer, either cover stock or at least paper quality. I was just telling you again, Sword of Ages. When I got that book, it's a hardcover, beautiful hardcover, incredible. Like even was telling you, like the design, the way the layout is for the introduction pages are incredible. Very, very beautiful book. And I was like, I feel like I got my money's worth for $20. Really getting. But when I buy, something like a $5 book, and I might not be in love with the story, I don't really feel like I'd want to, to keep reading that if it's going to be $5 a book. Especially sometimes most story arcs, for the most part, are 5 to 6 issues. You don't see a lot of single one-and-done kind of stories, and it's a whole arc. So if you want to know what happens, you have to at least do the 5 or 6 issue arc, or wait for the trade. Which sometimes the trade is more affordable than buying the individual issues.
I'd say, this is kind of a minor problem, but when I was a kid, creators used to stay on books longer. And I find that artists these days don't like to stay on a book for more than a few issues at a time. And to me, that's a big problem in the industry because, this as somebody who draws, like the longer you stay on a book, the more comfortable you get with those characters, the better your art gets. We talked on an episode that hasn't posted yet, but we talked about New Warriors and Derek Robertson. And when Derek Robertson first started New Warriors, he was following up Mark Bagley, who is one of the greatest Spider-Man artists of all time. He might be number one. And Mark Bagley was a beast back then, and Derek Robertson's art was not up to snuff. But within, I'd say 6 or 7 issues, his art got so much better, and he's actually my favorite New Warriors artist, because his work was allowed to grow. But if Derek Robertson was started in 2020 or 2019, he wouldn't have been on that book for 7 issues or 8 issues. He'd have been on there for 3 or 4, and then been like, all right, that's enough, and went to do something else.
Look at Ryan Otley on Invincible.
Right.
He was his only book really that he worked on before he's doing Spider-Man now.
Well, no, he did that. He did that book Haunt as well.
Yeah, but that was actually just for a little bit. I don't even think that book lasted that long.
No, it didn't. Him and Greg Capullo. I didn't know how it worked, but they worked on it together.
In terms of Ryan Otley, he started I think around, I want to say issue 12. It was the original artist. Corey
I think
Walker.
It was he did 7 and 8, and then went off of it, and then started as official artist around 12.
Yeah,
I want to say.
And his art was always good in my opinion. But you really, if you go look back at his earlier stuff compared to when he finished,
right?
He really did evolve. And, you can see the style is still very similar, but he definitely got a lot better, a lot more confident, too, anatomy and stuff. Because there's some crazy stuff that he does eventually, visual-wise, that he starts experimenting with towards the end of that series, when he starts to really hit his stride art-wise.
And that's just me. And I find that a lot of modern artists, if you really want to make your name in the industry, people have to be able to point to like a run of something that you did.
Yeah.
Either you have to have your own creator-owned series that just knocks it out of the park, which is it's difficult. It's difficult to do that. Or you have to have like an extended run on something that somebody cares about, like Greg Capullo, for instance. Greg Capullo had been around for years. I mean, my favorite stuff that he did was like his X-Force run and his Quasar stuff, like his early stuff. And, he made kind of a name for himself on Spawn, but up until his Batman run, like people still kind of had him in the back of their mind, but they didn't really think about him. But then he did that extended run on Batman, and now he's considered like a titan of the industry, even though he's been in the industry for like 30 years.
Yeah, but like I said, for going for comic stores, what could help it? That would help publishers, but that might be a little unrealistic at the moment. And what could probably just really help local stores right now during coronavirus, I think is we've said at the beginning, just support them in a way like if you want to mail order, find your local shop, mail order stuff from them. If they can do curbside, do that, because really thinking about it, there's not too much extra you can do besides that, right, in terms of right now.
Mm-hmm.
In coronavirus, definitely plug them. I think some stores, if they're not doing it already, they should definitely adapt it. It's become a big thing to do Facebook reply sales. Are you familiar with that, Adam?
You mean like online where they'll... Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, Scott at 3 Alarm does that.
Yeah, so a couple of stores saw the first
it's like auctions.
Yeah, and it's not really auctions. Sometimes it'll be like, so I want more comics. A lot of the guys from the shop will basically get a stack of books that they want to probably go through, and they might have a normal price they sell something at. It might be a variant cover or some key issue or something. They're like, I'll let it go for X amount of dollars, and just get to comment below. I think a lot of stores, especially right now, if they're not doing it already, they should really do that. That might help them out. Or if your store doesn't do it, maybe ask them if they're ever going to do something like that, like a live stream to sell some stuff.
Mm.
Especially it helps them out if they have stuff that they would normally put on eBay and just sit there, probably go faster. They kind of leverage their audiences. I think that can help them out. If you have a store that doesn't do a live sale, maybe just see what they say about it. They might say no, but if there's interest in it, they might actually consider it. And I think that can actually help some shops that can't have anyone come in, or someone's that they can't even go into the shop. Maybe they can operate from their house in terms of doing these reply sales and the mail order stuff.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I think we've said all about we have to say. Like,
yeah.
At the end of the day, nobody wants to see the comic book industry go away. At least not any real fans. We don't want. The reason we try to avoid talking negative is because I don't want people to give the impression that that's how I feel about comic books. I get frustrated seeing something that I love, that I grew up with, fall apart. But I think we've covered some good points here. Subscribe to the channel if you want to. You can find Travis at artoftravishymel.com. That's his website, and your Instagram is Travis_Hymel. Hymel, by the way, is Hymel.
Yes.
Anything else you want to plug?
Unfortunately, because of what's happening with Diamond, I don't mind the books I was going to have come out. Arc World and there was another one called Hourglass are probably pushed back indefinitely. I don't know when Arc World is coming out for sure. Once this comes out, because it was already heading to the printer. Right. Right before this. I just don't know when Hourglass is going to actually come out. And that's from Full Moon Comics. And there's another one that I'm going to be doing, which the production is. A lot of pros this happened to who work on comics. If the comics aren't shipping right now, there's no reason to do production. So that's so I'm not the only person who has this happen to. It sucks, but unfortunately, I don't have anything really to plug.
All right.
Oh, you know what? I will say this. because ArcWorld, because they did have a Kickstarter for ArcWorld, and Josh Blaylock is the writer and the publisher of Devil's Due. He just actually released, if you did back that Kickstarter, because they did release the PDF for ArcWorld, which is 41 pages, and then a bunch of extra stuff talking about the science that Josh actually had researched to incorporate into the book. Very, very fun read. I hope people enjoyed it, what they saw. So definitely check that out if you were a Kickstarter member. I don't know if Josh is releasing anything else digital right now.
All right. Well, I guess that'll do it. Like I said, subscribe to the channel. You know, if you want to, like, thumbs up, leave a comment. And hey, at the end of the day, be kind to the people around you, and you know, try to help your neighbors, because we're living in a strange world right now, and you need more than just you're gonna need help.